Chapter 10. Creating Your Own Talent. Creativeness contains a secret. The creative man exhibits a deep psychic tie with the inscrutable mystery of life. He performs in his work with the same naturalness as the flower grows from the soil, for he has attained to a unity in mental and spiritual relationships that make him seem part of the thing he is doing. The artist incarnate. There is a living and super force whose sphere of action is largely invisible and outside the boundaries of our workday world. There is something more purposeful than atoms. There is a higher evolved intelligence than any that is contained within the human brain. There is a door into a world beyond, which sometimes opens and allows the individual to be seized by strange potencies tremendously above the level of his personal abilities. When that happens, we see the artist incarnate, the man with a super talent who is able, in one sphere of his activity, to demonstrate directly to us the incalculable power and wisdom and beauty of the divine. The mystery of the talented man is that he is rooted directly in universal mind, that it manifests through him without any restriction or distortion by the ego. It is not the man who is responsible for his work, but a power beyond and above him that is manifesting through him, using him as an instrument. In the deepest essence, each man is an artist and only comes to his complete fulfillment as an individual when he gets his egoistic nature out of the way and allows the creative talent of the divine to work through him to accomplish those tasks that can be best done through his individually honed nature. When we live out our lives focused in the ego and bound to egoistic desires and satisfactions, it becomes impossible for us to achieve a spiritual awakening or to fulfill ourselves as creative persons. The little life we live is important, not for the creature comforts it brings, but for the search it involves us in, until we make our primary purpose the discovery of who we are and where we came from and what our relationship to life is. We must live out our brief sputtering of the candle in complete unawareness and blind automatism, following the pressures that develop in the outer world as they impinge upon our senses. The creative vision. When the inner soul of man is touched by perception of the creative side of his nature, he sees at once the disaster inherent in a conduct of life based upon material goals. He sees that this thing he has always thought himself to be, his ego, is illusory, that the desires growing out of the ego lead him into a maze of intricate byroads that inevitably will lose his chance at enlightenment. Such a man may give up all possessions, all fame, all creature comforts, so as to be misled no longer, and take up his existence with a resolve to be motivated in all things through an inner light that proceeds out of universal mind. Such enforced asceticism allows the individual to engross himself completely in the service of the secret self. John the Baptist, prowling the wilderness in search of his immortal soul, is no more an example of it than is the French painter Gauguin, giving up career and family to exile himself on a South Sea island to paint pictures. Each has been touched by the creative vision. Each must serve it at all cost. When a man's eyes have been opened to the creative nature of the divine, he no longer can help himself, must serve it as an instrument, and nothing stands in his way. The creative process is impersonal. It seizes the nature and uses it to the utmost, and the person performs feats of creation far above anything possible to his normal conscious mind. When this force truly predominates in our makeup, it monopolizes our energy. In the awakened artist, life is ruled by the subconscious. Conscious intention means little, and the man is swept along on subterranean currents in which he is firmly enmeshed and which he joyfully participates. Common consciousness. Every man has a talent in some area of his nature, as big a talent as has ever existed, and if this talent has not manifested, it is because his egoistic nature has dammed it up. No matter how long the dam has existed, no matter how tightly controlled the egoistic nature, the dam can be broken, and the power can be let loose, and a man can realize the highest level of his talent and live the life of the artist incarnate. To turn the eye within and to release the egoistic nature from selfish desire is the first thing to be done. Once the whole nature is turned over to a power greater than it, to be used for whatever purpose, without aim or intention, then the power comes through. Then the man begins to be transformed, performing naturally in all circumstances, guided correctly in all actions. Psychic position. There is tremendous joy in correct psychic positioning of the ego. There is a feeling of usefulness that comes to the individual, a rooted certainty in his soul that he is performing in the best manner possible. This is the feeling of grace that comes to the religious man. This is the time of creativity that comes to the artist. This is the period of great productivity that comes to the businessman. This is the time of superior skill that comes to the athlete. Each serves, performs under the impulsion of an intelligence and talent so vastly superior to the surface mind that the relationship is accepted as a happy child follows a loving father. Of this time of attunement and consequent creation, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "One can hardly reject completely the idea that one is the mere incarnation or mouthpiece or medium of some almighty power. The notion of revelation describes the condition quite simply, by which I mean that something profoundly convulsive and disturbing suddenly becomes visible and audible with indescribable definiteness and exactness. One hears, one does not seek, one takes, one does not ask who gives. A thought flashes out like lightning, inevitably without hesitation. I have never had any choice about it. Everything occurs quite without volition, as if in an eruption of freedom, independence, power and divinity. It takes courage to push off into the unknown realms of the subconscious. It takes daring and boldness to abandon the little ship of egoistic self and swim to that enchanted island of the secret self that lies beyond the horizon. Many people cling to their egoistic natures as if they might be saved by them instead of inevitably abandoned. Pain and frustration and ineffectuality are the only rewards that come to the man who follows his ego, and yet he often clings to his false idol through thick and thin, much as a drowning man grasps at a straw. Often he has so educated himself to the existence of the phantom he worships that even when he sees he is deluded, he cannot bear to part with his ghost. But part he must, push off into the enchanted regions of the subconscious he must, for finally his ego self abandons him altogether, breaks down and disintegrates with the disintegration of the body. In the end he realizes that he must throw himself upon the mercy and grace of something infinite and eternal, which caused him to be born in the first place, and now causes him to die. Metaphysical adventure. Religious revelation is exactly the same thing as creative activity. They are both metaphysical adventures. They involve the acquisition of a total instead of a partial view of the universe. They are out of time and space and individuality and are centered in eternal terms and whole significances. Talent develops in a person when his spiritual awakening has begun because talent is inherent in each of us, and the purpose of life is that we be creative. When the spiritual awakening is true, so will the talent be true, and not compulsive or obsessional, allowing the individual to perform his work out of sheer joy, dropping his fruits like a ripe tree. It then becomes possible for him to obey his instincts and intuitions and not to be inhibited in his actions by what others expect of him. He gets near the heart of truth. He sees the sham and hypocrisy that are bound to partiality. He subordinates his partiality completely in all his actions and thought, and the talent that is visited upon him is the talent of something beyond him. Art speaks to us in symbols of the universality of our true being. By it we perceive a portion of that ecstasy and unity from which we have sprung. By it we are able to achieve an inkling of the great destiny that awaits man. Someday men will become thoroughly awakened spiritually and consequently completely religious, not just believers as a few men are now, but knowers, causers, prime movers, thoroughly enlightened gods in fact, even as now in potential. The attitude that results from a man's discovery of his inherent talent is not one of intentioned action or thought, but one that looks for discovery. The creative writer does not take up a pen with an idea of making a certain thing, but only to see what will come through him and manifest itself on paper. The man who truly uses his talent is able to do so only because he lets it use him. The correct mental attitude is that whatever is there will come through and need neither be started nor stopped. You do not have to know what is coming, what it will look like, but simply have an open mind and let it through. Never even bother to look at it closely, for if you do, you may think you know what it is, and by that mental fixation, you'll make it static and it will no longer grow and be flexible and creative. All that is great and good and lasting springs out of subconscious processes of the secret self, and when we are moved by our greater minds, we exhibit the talents that are ours. Creative labor. 1,000 faces has the secret self, approached by 1,000 doors, and when one is opened and that face beheld, there bursts through the individual a torrent of creativeness, a kind of super talent. Partial is a human being, barely aware, a surface manifestation of unlimited realms of subconscious intelligence. But there is a path by which each may penetrate universal mind, and when he does, he creates his own talent, depicting for the world some particular aspect of the divine. No man is denied talent except by himself. When he allows his consciousness to be hemmed in by the ego, he is unable to pull upon subconscious levels for the inspiration and drive necessary to creative work. Unique individuality is the vehicle by which the secret self uses for the manifestation of talent, and is largely being stultified by our modern industrial society. Our education teaches conformity. The industrial machine needs workers, and workers must be predictable, and predictability, as far as society is concerned, is best obtained by inculcating the same social conscience in each man. Consequently, the individual lives a routine that is not of his own choosing, but has been selected for him by society. His opinions also have been given to him by a group, and he accepts them as part of the condition of his life. All thinking is done for him. He believes the political institution best that he belongs to, the labor union best that he belongs to, the state, city, and community best that he belongs to. He is unable to make an objective decision about anything he encounters, but reacts to everything as it affects his performed opinions. This egoistic basis for judging things is completely false and completely static because it does not allow the individual to grow. Truth, in some final analysis, may be absolute, but for the individual man, it is an individual matter. What is good for one is not necessarily good for all, but neither is the good of all necessarily best for the individual. Productivity. The man who endures all to make money is a classic example of repression and inhibition. He swindles his inferiors and fawns on his superiors, and by this consequent warping of moral values so completely represses the secret self that it is impossible for him to be creative or spontaneous in any area of his activity. Making money is not an end in life. Pursuing the god Mammon has only fatal results. But achievement is one of life's primary aims, and achievement often results in monetary success. To be what we naturally are and to live and act as we naturally were created should be the primary aim of each of us. We have been put here on earth by a power greater than we are. We have been manifested in our particular form so as to reflect in humanity an image of the divine. We cannot reflect this image or do the work natural to us if we become repressed by centering our consciousness in our egoistic natures. Spontaneity is the secret of doing things well. A man acts in accord with his whole nature when he does things feelingly instead of thinkingly. Reason is valuable too, but it serves a limited world and a limited knowledge. When a man acts only according to his reason, he acts with the barest facts in his possession. But when he acts instinctively and intuitively, he acts as an instrument of the secret self. And behind his action lie all knowledge, all intelligence, all power. When you are spontaneous in your actions and in your thoughts, you are being yourself. And when you are being yourself, you are 100 times more effective, more joyful, more creative than you are when you are ordering your life in accordance with the aims of the surface mind. The consciously controlled and intentioned man is suppressing his talent, for he is suppressing the action of the divine within him. No talent ever is exhibited by the conscious mind or ego, and the man whose life is ordered by them can never be creative. Creativeness and competitiveness. When you turn your life over to the secret self, the channel in you best adapted for expression of the divine is cleared and developed, and unique talent is exposed. A direction of growth is opened within which you are perfectly free. It has little to do with your position in society or your membership in social groups. Your mind and talent develop independently of material associations because you have turned them over to the secret self to use as they are best fitted. Each of us most satisfies himself as a person and fulfills himself as a member of society when he lives the life of an artist, not necessarily that of a painter or writer, but an artist in the sense that his attitude towards all things is creative rather than competitive. The world of competition is the world of egoistic desire, for competition seeks ascendancy over others. People whose ruling passion is to prove themselves better usually look upon the world with hostile eyes and regard every man as an enemy. Such limited perception of the nature and purpose of life clearly destroys more often than it blesses, for victory always is temporary, and defeat awaits all whose lives revolve around superiority. The ego is born, blooms, withers, and dies, just as the material body, and the individual whose aspirations center around it must follow a cycle that leads to eventual defeat and disintegration. Surrender brings control. The enlightened man is a talented man because he is a creative man, and this creativity is instilled in him by a sense of unity with all things. Obstacles and opposition and enemies have meaning for him only as they indicate a lack of understanding within himself, and he never seeks accomplishment by running headlong at things, but only by attempting to mentally and spiritually penetrate their true meaning. Has the ship of your life come to disaster through running around on uncharted shoals? If so, the greatest lesson you can learn is now possible, for your ship never would have grounded if the proper navigator were charting the course. Your surface self and egoistic nature have been at the helm, and the unlimited perception of surface mind could not possibly know of the uncharted shoals. Now your ship is aground, and the only way that it can be freed is to give over command to the master who knows these waters well. Surrender is the principle by which ultimate control is gained. The bossy surface self continually tries to run the show, and its enamoring cry of I may easily delude the whole consciousness into limited life and knowledge. But when a person runs into sufficient pain and difficulty, a crack appears in the hard veneer of the ego, and a light is let through which illuminates all for one startled instant of awareness. Then a man knows that his life and self are in the hands of something greater than he is, that his identity with the surface mind has always been an illusion, which in this moment of enlightenment he is freed from. Feeling your talent. Each man is by some secret liking connected to a particular aspect of life. When he has become freed of the repressions, limitations, and inhibitions imposed upon him by his education and training, he is able to expose this subconscious preference and by it attune himself with the creative talent that naturally is his. Such talent has limitless possibilities for manifestation. It need have no connection with the so-called arts, may be as simple a thing as a talent for kindness or love. It may be a talent for speaking, for percussion, for persuasion, for teaching, for research, for study. It may be in science or business. But wherever it is, it will prove, on exposure, to be vastly superior to the abilities of people who are guided solely by competitive aims and egoistic desires. It will proceed out of an inexhaustible fount, be superior to the person, seem to use him rather than he uses it. His ordinary mortal self will live with his talent in a constant state of startled delight. He will know it is a visitation of something above and beyond him, will treat it at all times with loving care, follow it, obey it, and never command it. The most completely frustrating thing that can happen to the individual life is for inherent talent to fail to develop. Such failure only can come about through the ego controlling the nature, restricting the individual's growth in the direction intended. The torrent of creative energy that exists in every human being becomes dammed up only with the gravest danger. Resentment, bitterness, hate, and hostility are the emotional maladjustments that result from a frustrated creative nature, and these inevitably find their counterparts in physical illness, heart trouble, circulatory disease, arthritis, rheumatism, cancer, ulcer, are all psychosomatic symptoms resulting from dammed up creative energy. Your separate star. True artists, we all are, inherently, for each of us reflects an image in the growing body of mankind, of the one mind and intelligence that lies behind creation. We paint a picture as we go through life of that mystic and occult realm whence we originated, and to which we one day will return. When we depart, the picture remains, with our signature in the corner, and is just as surely the representation of what we saw and felt and heard and attempted to communicate as is the picture of the painter, signed and hung up upon the wall of the gallery. And in the final analysis, who is to judge which vision is the most beautiful or worthwhile? For if a man live the life of an artist, his hand is guided by a will other than his own, and what is wrought through him is wrought at the behest of the divine, whose deft brushstrokes are gradually adding to the picture of eternity and infinity. Throw off the egoistic bonds that hold you and allow the secret self to shine through. You will become the artist incarnate. A talent will begin to develop in you, toward which your whole nature can be lent. You will begin to do the work that only you can do, that will fulfill you as a human being and as an aspiring soul. Wherever your heart leads, you may joyfully follow, with an inner certainty that you are acting in accord with the deepest motivations of life.